Okay, we're going to start with the truss rod, and it's going to be important that you keep the guitar in correct tune throughout the entire process. It's already in tune to start with right now. Now, the reason why there's a truss rod on a guitar to begin with is because you have 6 strings on a wood neck that are under tension. The result is that you have a bowing created up towards the strings as a result of that tension. A certain amount of bowing is actually very desirable to have smooth playability over the entire neck. But if you have too much bowing, for example, you may find that the action's impossibly high up in the upper registers. If you don't have enough bowing, then you may find there's some weird artifacts like buzzing or rattles as you play the lower part of the neck. So that bowing, which is referred to as relief, is controllable by a metal rod inside the neck that's called a truss rod. Now, on one end of the truss rod is a nut that by tightening it, it actually reduces the bowing or relief, lays the neck more flat. If you loosen the nut, then it will actually increase the bowing. Now, how much bowing should you have? Well, there's a specification for that, and we'll cover that in just a second. But basically, you measure it by laying a straight edge along the entire length of the neck, and at the midway point, you measure that gap from the bowing. Now, you can use a nice metal straight edge that's cut to the length of the neck, but you really don't have to because you already happen to have 6 very good straight edges on your guitar with your strings. So therefore, the process instead just becomes simply fretting at the first and last fret and then measuring at the 8th fret, which is the midpoint. Now, in order to do that, you would need 3 hands or a helper, and that's why we're using a capo, because it's just going to free up a hand for you. It doesn't have to be fancy at all. We'll go ahead and fix this on. And the capo should sit on top of the fret rather than behind it, the way you might normally use it for playing. And then the process therefore becomes using the appropriate thickness gauge, holding down the other fret, and sliding the gauge in at the 8th fret. Now, if you find that you're pushing the string up, that means you don't have enough gap or a relief, and therefore you actually need to loosen the truss rod nut to increase bowing. If on the other hand you still have remaining gap when the thickness gauge is slid in there, that means you have too much relief and you'll want to tighten the truss rod slightly. Now, as far as the neck goes, the general specification is to use a 10,000ths of an inch thickness gauge, which is 0.010 inch or 0.25 millimeters. And we're going to measure, as I said, at the 8th fret. So the process simply becomes holding down the other fret at the pick guard and then carefully sliding the thickness gauge in on top of the 8th fret and below the string. And you're going to want to observe to see if there's if there's sufficient gap. In this case, I have a little excess gap, meaning I have a little too much relief. So I'm going to want to tighten the truss rod just slightly. And any of these adjustments, but especially the truss rod, only make small adjustments at a time and then just retune and check again. I happen to know that this neck requires a 4 millimeter Allen key. You're going to want to make sure that it's fully seated so that you're grabbing the whole nut. And we're going to want to turn it clockwise just slightly. Okay. Ideally, you would give the neck 5 to 10 or more minutes to settle. That's because it's made of wood. It's going to resist those changes that you've just done with a truss rod. We don't really have the luxury of the time right now, so we're going to check it again. But before we do so, it does affect tuning, so we've got to take another quick look at tuning. Don't have to have perfect performance style tuning, but have it close enough so the string tension is about the same. And let's put the capo back on and have another look. That's good. All right, so that takes care of the truss rod. Now, normally you'd just move to action, but there's a one-time adjustment or check really that you should do the first time you do a setup, and that is just take a look at your nut to make sure the clearance is good there, because the nut serves a couple purposes. One is obviously spacing the strings correctly, But there's a slot for each string, and the depth of that slot is very important now. And more expensive guitars, chances are it's going to come from the factory with the proper depth. But maybe on an entry-level guitar like this, it might not be just right, and you can otherwise do a setup. Everything seems fine, but you still get some weird artifacts like buzzing. And taking a look at the nut might reveal that there's something wrong. So again, as a one-time check, it's just useful to get out the thickness gauge again. This time go with a thicker gauge, 20 to 22 thousandths. That's 0.022, which is 22 thousandths. And take a look at the first fret just by sliding the gauge in and having a quick look. And this one looks good, so we're good to go. And the next step we're going to do is go to the action in the next part.